Two guests. We are now recording. So obviously Haiti has been in the news quite a bit recently, and this community has been tracking it quite closely as we're all very much wrapped up in the Global Fragility Act implementation. So we're really pleased to have some colleagues here for an overview of a recent pilot program, and then a broader discussion on the situation in Haiti and how there is still possibly some avenues towards addressing the fragility and challenges in Haiti through GFA implementation. So delighted to have such a great group here. At this point, I will kick it over to Christy Martins, who is the practice area leader for peace and stability at MSI. Thank you so much, Christy.
Yeah, thank you, Megan, and thanks to AFP for hosting us. Thanks everybody for joining. Very happy to bring us together to talk about Haiti. Somebody joked to me yesterday that we're the only ones talking about Haiti while the Africa Leaders Summit is in Washington this week, but let us not forget what's going on there. Some of you may have joined us back in July. We did a panel with Kalinda as well to introduce MSI's Solstice tool, which is a rapid analysis assessment tool aimed at providing immediate programming responses. So at that time, we let everybody know that we intended to pilot it in Haiti, and now we've subsequently done that, and Kalinda and others are here to help us report findings and then engage in a broader discussion about the situation in Haiti and what some programming responses might be helpful at this time. So without further ado, I'm joined by in the room by Kalinda Magliore, Technical Director in MSI's Peace and Stability Practice, and then virtually by Jeff Poincy, who's a Program Manager at PartnersGlobal, and Emmanuela Douyon, who's a Haitian activist and worked with Kalinda on the pilot. Over to you, Kalinda.
Thanks, Christy.
Hi, Kalinda, are you speaking? If you are, we can't hear you.
Oh, and repeat. I'm sorry, my mic was not on. Hi, everyone. I want to thank the Alliance for Peace Building for keeping the conversation on Haiti alive. Like Christy said, sometimes it feels like we're the only one still talking about Haiti, but we'll continue to do so. I want to thank Jeffsky, Emmanuela, and Christy for being on this with me. And without further ado, I'm ready for the presentation. Thank you.
Nick, can you please share your screen?
Yes. Just give me 1 second. Everyone see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Oops. Okay.
And go ahead.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So why are we still talking about Haiti? Haiti has been in an endless spiral of fragility for decades. And donors, government, communities, organizations who want to implement programs need rapid analysis on indicators of fragility and the way they interconnect in order to do like programming that will have a lasting impact. This assessment used the Solstice diagnosis tool, offering an iterative approach, the possibility to start developing relevant activities right away and to be updated as context evolve. We can change the slide. Slide 2. Perfect. Maybe we can remove the notes from the. Let me just continue.
Is it? Is it in the slideshow view, Megan?
I don't think
The-
so, because these are my
The
notes.
lower right
Yeah.
corner.
Are you talking about this?
Yeah, can
The
we just
lower
go
right
in
corner
and
should be-
slideshow view?
Yes, 1 second, sorry.
I actually realized while we're waiting that I haven't thanked all of you to be attending this presentation today. Thank you all.
Hi. We have a new system now. We have
Do you
a
see
new
the,
system. So,
do you see the notes still?
What does that mean?
you have to start this again to do it.
You have to do what?
But you have to start it
Somebody
again.
was not muted.
Yeah.
Nick, I'll share screen.
Here we are. Okay. Slide 2, please. Okay. Why Solstice? Solstice is a practitioner tool developed by MSI aiming to provide rapid analysis to inform immediate practical application for programming. The tool takes a systems approach to conflict and stability, such as it is designed to analyze the full ecosystem in which fragility and conflict is able to perpetuate, and work with those system actors to define the problem set driving the fragility and conflict. The tool identifies the multiple factors in their interconnection that allow fragility to perpetuate. Haiti was the first pilot for Solstice implementation. This tool comes at a time where 80% of the countries hosting a USAID mission or program can be described as fragile or conflict affected. We recognize that each context is unique and dynamic, and the tool is designed to be iterative, such that the diagnosis should happen on an ongoing basis. We did a more complete presentation of the tool itself in July, like Christy mentioned earlier, during a similar AFP event. For those who want more details on the methodology itself, I believe the presentation is still available online.
So I'll stop there. In case you have any questions about the presentation. We have questions.
Would you just do, everybody please
the-
keep your microphone on mute during this if you're not speaking? Thank you.
Haiti was the first pilot of Solstice. It was realized under difficult conditions and with a reduced team. I want to thank Christy and Emmanuela Douyon for their dedication and relentless work during these past weeks to complete the assessment. Most interviews were done through WhatsApp calls in a context of security and fuel crisis, where in-person meetings were not an option. The lack of fuel also affected the access to electricity and internet, so you get the picture. Both Emma and Christina showed an acute understanding of the context and tremendous imagination and diligence to see this process through. In short, Solstice evaluate the 5 selected characteristics through 4 questions each. Next. It's implemented in 3 phases. The first phase is the identification, where we find the different elements contributing to fragility and analyzing them as a system. It consists in answering the questions arising from the different characteristics. It combines quantitative and qualitative data, allowing it to be flexible to go back in time to examine history, ethnical dynamics, social norms and culture, political dynamics, livelihood, human development level reasons behind certain indicators of fragility. Then the second phase is the interconnection, where we draw conclusions from each characteristic, find the root causes and how they interconnect with each other. This phase also includes a very basic stakeholder analysis. And then the third phase, which is the whole purpose of these assessments, are programming responses. It's directly linked to programming, and it consists of the elaboration of we call it a micro theory of change for each cluster of answers. And prioritization is done depending on the acuteness of the characteristics. In some cases, it's going to have to do with windows of opportunities or constraints. The questions stemming from each characteristic may seem numerous, but they can be answered in a three weeks time frame with the help of a grid. That's the grid you see on the screen. The strategy is not to dive deep into each element at first, but identify the characteristic that most contribute to fragility in the studied context. After the first round of data collection and the set of questions answered, the team can identify the main characteristics of fragility. Answers to the questions come from different sources. Hence, the team members determine an average response to fill the grid. The grid identified the characteristic that are located at the negative end of the fragility to resilience continuum. And these are the characteristics that are going to be prioritized for programming. With the scoring, I will give key illustration of important elements collected in the interviews. It is not an exhaustive compilation of all the findings, but it's just to give you an idea. For the first characteristic, which is connectivity and diversity, the result here is clearly low with an average of 13. And here, both interviews and data primary sources and secondary sources are taken into account. And you can see the results very clearly. We define connectivity here by the manner and degree to which social actors interact with each other and the quality of these relationships. Too many or too few connections can hamper the way a society reaches consensus on key issues. In the case of Haiti, the findings show that the level of social cohesion reveals too few connections, the absence of dialogue among key actors, and it can be linked to the incapacity to address main grievances. We have a quote here from Louis-Henri Mars, who's the executive director of La Pour la Paix, an organization promoting peace and focusing on youth and their community. Louis-Henri says that social cohesion in Haiti is so low that Haiti could not be described as a nation, but more as an island made up of different tribes operating in silos. Primary consistent grievances are insecurity, high cost of living, economic security, food security, impunity, ongoing fuel shortages, which is more current, lack of democratic value, etc. Lack of vision, lack of trust. There's a lack of diversity that was, I would say, a paramount issue for all the people interviewed, in the sense that there's a lack of representation of major groups in some sectors, according to most interviewees. There's a perception that male, white, or mulatto dominate private sectors, that few women are in politics and in parliament, etc. That all political decisions are taken in Port-au-Prince. A good example is the letter issued by the private sector just last week, calling everyone to rally into a national consensus to find a solution to the current crisis. And 2 days later, the Chamber of Commerce of the South just issued a letter to remind the private sector of Port-au-Prince that there are private sector elsewhere in the country. This is just an illustration of how there is a lack of representation at different level, whether it's gender, whether it's regional or social, into decision-making in the country. And in terms of numbers, the richest 20% of its population hold more than 64% of the total wealth, while the poorest 20% hold hardly 1%. Power dynamics and security. Here we're talking about the relative concentration and exercise of power in a society. In the case of Haiti, here you'll see that most results are at the end of the spectrum. Political repression, very high. To what extent does the state have a monopoly of the use of the force? Very low. Regular renewal of political personnel, very low. To what extent society turned to a state for security? Very low. As of October 2002, the Haitian government has officially sought assistance from foreign forces to address the escalating gang violence that paralyzes the nation. In a statement released a couple of weeks ago, the Fondation J'éclairé says that the state is losing its monopoly of the use of legitimate violence. Entire areas are controlled by armed gangs, often better armed and equipped than law enforcement authorities. 100% of the interviewees noted that there is high political violence and repression, and one noted that at this point it fits to talk about widespread violence. And yes, if opinions were that most of the gang activities and violence were concentrated in the Port-au-Prince areas, this is starting to change. So yes, we can talk about widespread violence. Again, 100% of the interviewees noted regular renewal of political personnel as very, very low. The last elections took place in 2016. Several interviewees rightfully noted as well that when a president can be assassinated in his own house under false pretenses of a DEA operation with no retaliation from its security forces, it shows a blatant lack of control from the state. For the third characteristics, which is the rule of law, state-society relationship, and patterns of government, which we consider as, I would say, the mother of the characteristics because everything lies in there. Again, the results are very similar. The state-society relationship is at the heart of fragility. In this relationship, what practitioners want to look for is to position the society on what we call the fragility to resilience continuum. And we have to examine the relations, the dynamics of inclusion versus exclusion, cohesion versus fragmentation, and the dynamics of resource generation and access. In the case of Haiti, what our assessment shows is that there is a crisis of legitimacy. Historically, the state has never been viewed as a provider of services, has always been an instrument to satisfy vested interests. And it's also for that historical perspective that's what also we were looking for. It's particularly true for the rural masses. A good example is how at the beginning of the last century, the whole country relied on the rural world for foreign debt service through a tax on agricultural exports. Middlemen from the cities and aggregators kept their profit intact, making farmers bear the whole burden. This is one of the factors that led to the agricultural decline that we see today. This is only one example of a traditionally rapacious state. This coupled with a heavy past of defiance towards the colonial administration and the response of the slaves to flee to the mountains, as I would say, institutionalized the marginalization of the rural masses and their rightfully mistrust and defiance towards Port-au-Prince and its state. Most people rely on the state and expect it to provide basic services, but the state is unable to meet their expectations. It is kind of a contradiction in, I would say, Haitian society. People distrust the state, they see it as the enemy, but at the same time, it is the biggest providers of jobs. It is always seen as the recourse, even though people are completely convinced that the state is unable to provide these services. And here are a couple of numbers from the last OCID survey. 56% of Haitians think that courts do not guarantee a fair trial. 76% of the population is not satisfied with the respect of its right to vote. 95% of the population does not trust the parliament. 90% does not trust the CEP, which is the Electoral Council. 86% does not trust the judiciary system. 81% doesn't trust the police and the local authority. 80% doesn't trust the executive. 95% doesn't trust the political parties. And 75% does not trust the media. That gives a clear picture. Capacities. In a society, capacities emerge from patterns of governance, reflecting how the state and society manage internal and external stresses that impact the commitment and ability to meet political, economic, social, security, and environmental needs. Capacities have the potential to manage and mitigate stresses, but they can also be negative and generate internal stresses of their own. In the case of Haiti again here, in terms of economic capacity, Haiti has the lowest GDP per capita in Latin America. The state and social actors have very little resources to absorb and manage the impact of stresses. Recurring political crises and natural disasters have weakened the state and societal actors' capacity to anticipate and adapt to stress. Haiti suffers from the most severe brain drain per capita in the world, with 80% of Haitians with university degrees living abroad. The diaspora does contribute greatly to families, with remittances being bigger than the national budget. However, there are still impediments to deeper involvement of the diaspora in a more collective way. Country-wise, there is no strategic plan to leverage the potential power and capacities of the diaspora to promote growth in Haiti. And finally, stresses. They can be generated internally, emerging from patterns of governance, or externally. In the case of Haiti, there are a little bit of both, or a lot of both, if I may say. Recurring political crises and natural disasters have weakened the state and its capacity to anticipate and adapt to stresses. Around 4.5 million people experience acute food insecurity. The level of demographic pressure is very high. There has been an unmanageable influx of IDPs in the recent years. There's almost 50,000 people being displaced between April 2001 and July 2002. Haiti remains one of the world's most exposed countries to multiple natural hazards, such as hurricane, floods, landslide, erosion, and earthquake. Some of them are geographically induced, but others are also the results of decades of bad governance. This tool uses as the premise that all characteristics of fragility are so, we can go to the next slide, that all characteristics of fragility are so deeply interconnected that they cannot be addressed separately, but must be addressed as a system. And here, through a diagram that is still a work in progress, we have tried to show how the different characteristics interact with each other. Fragility is a complex condition that is generated or mitigated by the interactions of state and society in a system. Understanding the systems requires analyzing each component, the relationships between them, and the way these relationships exacerbate or mitigate fragility. Here, we have coupled the characteristics together to understand the root causes and interactions. We have coupled connectivity and diversity with rule of law, state-society relationships, and pattern of governance. And the root causes that we can take away, I would say, from the interviews and from the literature review are various. There's a legacy of colonialism and slavery that has given us colorism, that also have given us a tradition, I would say, of exclusion, of dictatorship, a history of repression, and of political violence. The nation's growing social divide today impedes the country's ability to reach consensus on key issues. The case of the power dynamics that we're seeing here, there's the absence of a social contract. A lot of people talk about renewing or what's the term? Rebuild or repair the social contract. I think the findings here, and my personal opinion, is that we never had one to start with. There is a social contract to be built. There are no checks and balances, and the institutions are very weak. And all the interactions between these different characteristics contribute to the weakness of these institutions. Power dynamics are based on exclusion rather than inclusion and tend to be rigid and fragile. And that causes clash. And this is what we see today. In the case of capacities and stresses, there are different root causes. Like I said before, bad governance and lack of accountability, political repression that led to brain drain, lack of collective capacity, geographical position, and bad governance. The state's failure in managing internal and external stresses has impacted its ability to meet political, economic, social, and environmental needs. Internally generated stresses place additional strain on that state-society relationship that is already so weak and resulting in pattern of governance, for instance, corruption, and sustained inequitable access to education and health services, which in turn feeds into the lack of capacity. So it's an eternal vicious cycle. As you saw, Haiti ticks all the boxes. Hence, prioritization had to be done here in recognizing the objective constraints that are multiple, that impede some type of programming, and also identifying windows of opportunities and quick wins. These windows for us are how to increase the space for socialization, create a culture of accountability, resume basic provision of services to restore trust, and as well activities to encourage the political participation of marginalized groups. Other identified windows of opportunities are dialogue activities between people in the diaspora and between the diaspora and Haitian living in Haiti. Pilot investment projects from the diaspora to create success stories that can be repeated and break the myth that investments come to Haiti to die. And above all, pursuing capacity building, capacity improvement, and empowerment of local organizations in all sectors. There are key areas to prioritize, not only because they're the most urgent, but because without them, the rest cannot happen. The growing security crisis, of course, providing emergency relief services to the most vulnerable, and efforts to strengthen the social cohesion across all sectors, especially youth vulnerable to violence. Based on the priorities, constraints, and windows of opportunity identified, a micro theory of change has been elaborated for each of these characteristics. In the case of connectivity and diversity, if marginalized groups are better informed and empowered, then they will have increased ability and leverage to be better represented and to participate in political and social decision-making. And in order to do that, there are various things that can be done now. I'm sure that a lot of people in the attendance will see that things are missing from this list of programming, but there was a prioritization process that was made, and there's also things that are important that need to happen, but that cannot necessarily happen now for various reasons. One of the things that can happen now is diverse communication strategies to disseminate information on key issues to various groups that do not have access to it. Reinforce community development activities to continue to cultivate connections through arts, sports activity, which foster increased connectivities and diversities across the population. Host cross-sectoral dialogues, Haitian to Haitian, political sector, private sector, civil society, media, community leaders, and not only in Port-au-Prince, to foster increased understanding and persevere in building capacities of local organizations. You're gonna hear me say that at the end of almost every slide, because at the end of the day, I think it's the key. And if one day there is to be some legitimacy in any political process, it will be explained to the population through the local organizations that they trust. That's why these organizations need to be empowered and their capacity built. For power dynamics and security, the micro theory of change is if dialogue and trust is increased between communities and governments, there will be a lesser need to resort to violence and coercion in the exercise of power. This is half of the story, but this is what we can do programming on. I mean, we all are aware that security issues in Haiti can be put in 3 categories. There is poverty and lack of prospects. There are illicit traffics, both national and international, and there is power politics. But a development practitioner right now on the ground cannot act on all these things. What they can do is needs-based programming to gain community trust, including exchange programs and economic opportunities and job creation. Collaborative models between communities and local governments to engage local stakeholders in planning, design, and implementation of community prioritized small infrastructure. All of this is to rebuild trust. Participatory and inclusive conflict diagnostic to understand the local system or dynamics. In the case of the rule of law, state-society relationships and patterns of governance, if the state is not perceived as the predator, but as a service provider, a larger amount of people will participate in the political process, leading to a more inclusive society and increased collective ability to solve problems. In order to do that, there are informations needed. Qualitative and quantitative research to identify issues and behaviors to increase state legitimacy. Civic education training to reinforce knowledge of the population's rights and values as a citizen to marginalized population. Collaboration with communities for public service provision with state branding. And you'll see a lot of, I would say, common theme between this and for the power dynamic, because here the whole idea is to rebuild the trust between the citizen and the state, which is the first step for a contract. Creating targeted town hall activities to foster a strengthened state-society relationships, understand the most immediate needs, and open up dialogue between both parties. And finally, to start that culture of accountability, a citizen scorecard initiative to evaluate public service delivery and promote accountability. For capacities, the theory of change is if local opportunities can attract skilled resources instead of pushing them away, the government and the society will have more capacity to resist shocks. That's first of all, facilitate diaspora participation in political process, research and development initiatives with local or universities, foreign direct investments, and investment in development. Provide funding, mentorship, and technical assistance to develop initiatives for at-risk youth, initiative with the potential to educate, create jobs, and other opportunities. Facilitate linkages between private for-profit entities and communities to create training for jobs programs. Providing bridge funding to companies involved in their communities to waive the current crisis and avoid job loss, because this is what we're seeing right now. A lot of people are leaving the country for security reasons, but a lot of companies are also, it's a vicious circle. A lot of companies see their, I would say, their death accelerated by the fact that their key staff is leaving, but also because the market is shrinking. And these companies, that some of them are completely remote from the communities, but some have community rooting, they employ people in the community, and we have, we all have interest that they survive, that they are able to waive that current crisis. Finally, for the stresses, in my programming, I don't have displaced Haiti from hurricane area and seismic fracture, but we can do other things. Strengthening DRM governance systems and local organizations involved in disaster preparedness and response mechanism. Launch awareness campaigns for cholera, storms, earthquake, etc. Reinforce school recycling programs and cash forward activities aimed at directly rehabilitating damaged infrastructures and livelihood activities. Providing small grants to farmers to allow them to recuperate their capital after these disasters pass. In the South right now, this is one of the main problems. Not only have the farmers lost their cattle or the crops that they were preparing, but now that they are trying to get back on their feet, they have no market since Port-au-Prince is closed through the South entrance. This closes I would say the more structured part of the assessment, where from the results from the interviews and from the literature review, we have derived answers on each characteristics, and from there, a theory of change and programming responses. But there are also, and this is a collective work that I've done with Emmanuela and Christy, and there's also, I would say, general remarks based on the interviews collected and the general observations that we made. The growing security crisis is everyone's priorities. Emergency relief services to the most vulnerable and strengthening social cohesion. This is what people are asking. Solving and stabilizing the security crisis is paramount. Most internal stakeholders emphasize the importance of a foreign peacekeeping arm, which will strengthen Haiti's local security force, address the growing humanitarian crisis, and restore security. This is a controversial issue for several reasons. Inviting foreign military in the country raises concern about sovereignty. Past military interventions in Haiti did not solve the security crisis and did not leave lasting impact. However, beyond, I would say, the official discourse, this is what the majority of people that we've spoken to want. They want a relief right now, and the only form they see is through an external support. Concurrently, the two armed forces present in the country are currently unable to solve the crisis. But there's a need to methodically evaluate past interventions to avoid certain mistakes, such as, and this is a couple of examples, it's not exhaustive, but this work has to be done, such as the presence of forces from countries who do not even comply with the Rome Agreement, for instance, that we cannot hold accountable for any abuse. Remote camps in rural areas with no control to avoid abuses on local population, especially on women and children. Clear accountability mechanism that must be put in place and communicated broadly. More scrutiny into livelihood and cash forward activities in difficult neighborhood to make sure that most of the funds are not captured by gangs through gang leaders turned into community leaders. And above all, give more voice to local organizations. Each in their sector, they have been doing the work for decades. And this is one of the things that any external support needs to take in consideration. One of the remarks that was done about the MINUSTA is that not only was it a military force, but it was accompanied by sectorial units for everything, gender, economic development, everything, health, you name it. And to justify the existence of these units, they had to reinvent the wheel, and they worked without local organizations. These are mistakes that we should try not to do again. And organizations, donors, development practitioners are already doing that work. If we need a security force to support solving the security crisis, it should do just that. And leave all the governance aspect and the development aspects to people who have been doing that for decades and know how to do it. The security issue has to be understood holistically as part of a global collapse due to the absence of a contract between the state and the citizens. The national police should not be seen as a technical problem to solve with weapons, technical assistance, and you name it. But it should be seen as actually one of the institutions that is left standing in an institutional desert. Strengthening the HNP and weaning the corrupt, ill-equipped personnel out of it must integrate conflict transformation, all tied to political will. And again, it cannot be only a technical solution. It has to be seen in a bigger, I would say, holistic approach where we have a legitimate government with the trust of the population, and that these policemen that are exactly like, I would say, every citizen, the HNP is living today the same crisis that all national institutions are living. Most of his competent staff are fleeing the country as fast as they can. There is corruption, it is politicized, but this is not something unique to the national police. This is a diagnostic that can be made for all current institutions. We do not have a Supreme Court working. We do not have an electoral council working. We do not have sectorial ministries working. The national police is no different. Due to the growing security crisis, large communities of people continue to be forced out of their homes. Priority should be given to services to them. Emergency shelters, food and provision, mobile clinic, legal assistance, psychosocial support, especially to women. It is also key to invest in peace-building activities, such as programming with centers, conflict transformation, trauma healing, cross-sectorial dialogues, and all of that is also valid for the HNP, which is at the center of all conversation right now. Socioeconomic trainings, civic education trainings, leadership seminars, and more, all of that needs to be integrated into any, I would say, lasting solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalinda. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. Kalinda and I were at lunch before the panel, and I told her I could just listen to her talk about Haiti for hours. I want to turn to our other panelists, starting with Emmanuela. There she is. Emmanuela, you were a core contributor to the Haiti Solstice pilot. I'm curious to hear from you what struck you the most about these results that Kalinda has just presented.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks to everyone attending to the event. I had a pleasure working on Solstice, and actually I've been observing and analyzing the social political situation in Haiti for years. And after contributing to the Haiti Solstice pilot, I can say that I had additional evidence to confirm how in less than 2 years, Haiti went from dealing with a protracted political crisis to facing its worst security crisis. It's like the security situation is now the most significant problem to solve, and it's also the biggest constraint to address in order to solve other issues, such as the humanitarian crisis. If 2 years ago, people were asking, where do we start? What is the priority? And many different actors had different answers to that question. Today is different. And working on Solstice confirmed it for me. Everyone is like security, 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 security. I think we reach a moment where we have an entry point, we have a bigger problem, and it's urgent. And that shift also show how it is important to have rapid and iterative tools like Solstice, because assessment that we had 2 years ago are not as relevant as they were, because in the past we could say that we need to address impunity, we need to address corruption, we need to address food insecurity. We had like the political crisis indeed, but now it's the security crisis that is the most important. And this is an update, and it shows how it is important to constantly follow the situation as it is evolving and adapt programming in order to be more effective. I also noticed, there were not many disparities in how people perceive the reality in Haiti, even if the experience and argument were different. I would expect some different responses from some people. For example, someone from the private sector, for some questions, I would expect someone from the private sector to answer differently from someone in rural area in Haiti. But turn out that we reach a point, maybe because the crisis has been here for so long, maybe everything deteriorated so much that it affects everyone. Therefore, there is like unanimity, there is a consensus on how they perceive the situation. We didn't have to do a lot of discussion to pick a score for each characteristic, because almost everyone were like not at all, very low, and it was obvious. We didn't really have to have like a consensus, because what we found in the background research was pretty much what the people said, instead that they added their personal experience, and it differed from one person to another in terms of personal experience. For example, in terms of representativity, someone from the private sector would say they do have access to power, even if they are not represented in political sphere. But someone in rural area would say that I don't feel represented and I don't feel like politics is useful at all. So there are some nuances like this, but at the end of the day, they reach the same conclusion. And one last thing I would say is that from the interviews, I could realize how some assumptions in the Solstice tools were accurate and helpful. For example, I smile when I asked the person from the rural area his perception on social cohesion. And his first answer was that if there were any social cohesion in Haiti, we wouldn't be in this crisis. I smile because in the Solstice tool, they say that too many or too few connections can hamper the way a society reaches consensus on key issues. That person in Nicaragua, Haiti, who has no idea of what Solstice is and what was written in Solstice, with the same conclusion. I found that really interesting. So I'll say those three were what struck me the most.
Thank you, Emmanuela. Those were all very interesting insights. And I like what you said about the need in such a dynamic context, which is how we designed Solstice, the need to be able to do these rapid assessments because things change so quickly. We need to make sure that our programming responses are up to date. And I like also, how you touched on, there's always something we can do. The only time you're guaranteed to have no results is when you do nothing. So that's part of the reason Solstice, we designed Solstice as well to demonstrate even in the most adverse and difficult of contexts, there are always entry points, as you said, and windows of opportunity. Jeffsky, I want to turn to you next, please. Question for you is, after this presentation and with your Haiti experience and the expertise of PartnersGlobal, what are some key windows of opportunity to program towards accountable governance in Haiti?
Thank you, Christy, and it's a pleasure for me to be, to be part of this discussion. And I think the tools really give a comprehensive view about the Haitian situation. It's a sad picture of the situation, but I'm afraid that it's very accurate. I've been following, just as Emmanuela Douyon, I've been following the situation in Haiti, and the results seem, pretty accurate and compelling. And at the same time, it shows, how complex is the Haitian situation right now. So the problems are so interrelated. The problems are so intertwined that it's extremely hard to prioritize, and it's extremely hard to even establish a causal relationship between those problems. And I think this is the main challenges when it comes to programming in Haiti, because the problems are so interrelated that it requires a very integrated and strategic approach, which most of the time is lacking from what we've seen in the past in Haiti. And as to accountable governance, I think there's a lot that can be done. I believe that to push for an accountable governance, there should be like a good interface between the citizen and the and the state. And as the result just showed, there's the social contract is lacking in Haiti. And I think it's a window of opportunity as well to implement activities that aim to build the social contract in establishing this interface so citizens and states can interact positively towards an accountable governance. And in regards to the Haitian crisis, what we've seen in the past, we don't repeat that often, but I think the Petro-Caribbean movement, which is one of the largest anti-corruption movement in Haiti, at least for the past decades, has been very instrumental in mobilizing the citizens against corruption, and even was one of the triggering factors of the political crisis that we have right now. I think that has shown us the role that the civil society can play in fighting corruption in Haiti. And this is like a window of opportunity as well, to build the civil society's capacity and push for those citizen-led anti-corruption activities, because they can have significant impact. And at the same time, of course, there are limitations to that, because citizen-led activities cannot be effective without like a responsive government, right? So there can be efforts also targeted into building the state institution, especially the anti-corruption institutions, such as the Court of Auditors and the ULCC that we have in Haiti, to make sure that they have the capacity that they need to investigate those anti-corruption, to investigate the corruption cases, like largest cases such as Petro-Caribbean. And the last thing that I want to mention about pushing for accountable governance, which I think is one of the important aspect of the fight against corruption, is the sanction, right? If you've been following the Haitian crisis, you realize that lately there have been sanctions being imposed on some of the most high level or high profile individuals in Haiti, including people from the business sectors and people from the political sectors, including senators, ministers. I think this has shown like a certain willingness of the international community to help Haiti address this issue, because one of the main issues in Haiti is impunity, right? So there hasn't been any will, any political will to go after those high profile individuals that are involved in corruption and other crimes. And I think this can set the stage to think about ways to leveraging those sanctions and into criminal investigation and criminal prosecution. I think it's a very important factor in the fight against corruption. And as I used to say, corruption is in nature a transnational issue, and there's no way that Haiti can effectively tackle corruption if the international community don't cooperate. And I think this is something that we definitely should leverage and make sure that we think about ways about making multilateral mechanism that can help us investigate and prosecute those high profile crimes, corruption cases in Haiti.
Thank you, Jeffsky, for the really comprehensive response. Two of the things that I heard that I just want to underline, you talked at the beginning of your response about how to think strategically and understand linkages that contribute to the weak governance in Haiti. And I think we often say it's become kind of cliche to begin with the end in mind, but it's just good to underline that point that you made, that in this type of context, and then specific to Haiti, that we do have to begin with the end in mind, recognizing that it will be dynamic and iterative, and we need to be flexible and adaptive in our approach. The other point you made that I want to underline, Jeffsky, is in a situation like Haiti, where we have weak governance structures, we need to get creative about how we can work on the demand side of governance, working with citizens, working with civil society, and supporting those Haitian actors and organizations to create the demand for good governance in the absence of it coming from the supply side. So thank you very much. Emmanuela, back to you, if I may. If there is a military intervention, what are a few guidelines under the do no harm principle that should be applied?
Thank you. Almost all the participants we interviewed told us that there need to be a military intervention in Haiti to solve the security crisis. However, military intervention could do more harm than good and further fragilize the state of the country, and it can contribute to the very controversial perception that some have of the international community and organization offering assistance to Haiti. But there are a few guidelines that should be applied. First, it needs to be approached as what it is, an additional intervention. This means that there is a legacy of past failed intervention that needs to be taken into account. And they need also to anticipate that they will face increased scrutiny, and it is therefore essential to apply all the lessons learned from the previous intervention. I'll say that's the first thing. They have done it in the past. Haiti has like a lot of experience when it comes to foreign military intervention, and we need to learn all the lessons from those previous interventions. Also, we must address more than the tactical aspect of the security crisis. The security crisis is mainly due to gang activity, gang violence, but the solution is not only about dismantling gangs. It is more than a simple security situation. It is one of the country's most critical and lasting governance problem. It is a governance problem for several reasons, and we are observing a situation where political actors, economic elites, and even some citizens living in marginalized communities have developed strong ties with the gangs. Some participants told us that people in Haiti do not turn to the state for security. They try to befriend with gangs because they know that the state cannot help. So they try to befriend with gangs so they can use them when they need them. We are in this complex situation. The gangs have some sympathy in some communities. And if a military operation consists of only arresting or killing some gangs leader and gang member, we will still have an ecosystem that nurtures and promotes gangs activity. And it will only be a matter of time until we find ourselves in an even worse situation. For example, the last UN mission left Haiti in 2017. And about 5 years ago, we are now in the worst security crisis situation we have seen in years. Therefore, it is really important to understand that it is a complex issue, and any intervention need to address more than the tactical aspect of the security crisis. Also, there need to be a proper political framework. There need to be buy-in from the actors, political actors and social actors, the private sector, opposition. We face a situation now where the security crisis is more urgent than the political one. However, the security crisis stems from the political turmoil, and intervention can worsen both problems. The fact that the government request came after large protests make more people sensitive. And if we have a military intervention without addressing this issue, it can further polarize the situation. We can have actors that become more radical, and this will complicate the chance to find a political consensus, which is very important if we want to engage in the path toward elections, and if we want to return to democracy and constitutional order. Though I would say that without a political consensus, without buy-in from both government, opposition, and key sectors, it will be a really fragile situation, and we may not be in a situation where military intervention can lead to expected outcome. And also, we need Haitian ownership of the intervention. This means ensuring that the national police is not simply following, but they are also leading, learning, so they can be ready to take over when the military force leave the country, because this is what happened. We had ministers here for many years. They left, and look where we are now. And Haitian ownership doesn't only mean working with the national police. it also means relying on local organization. They know the context well. Some of them are the only one who are still present in communities. From interviews with women organization and other people, we are like learning that many people fled some areas where gangs members are active, and only some people who have tied to organization are still there, and they know best how to rebuild their community. Therefore, it will be really important to rely on local organization and Haitian experts. And just like the international community starting with the sanctions, it will be also essential to include actions that tackle the root causes. Gangs do not just wake up people do not wake up when they become gang members. We have conditions that we have incentives as well. And if we really want to address the issue, there must be effort to fight impunity and corruption. We need to strengthen the judiciary system, restore the state of institution, and also we must see clear progress on some high-profile cases. For example, the assassination of former President Jovenel Moïse, lawyer Mofoyedova, activist Neti Duclair. There must be clear signal that there are efforts to tackle gangs, to tackle people who are supporting gangs, people who are engaging in crime. So all actors involved in this, all people, all the stakeholders, so they know that they will be held accountable. And also, we have countries like the US who have efforts to do at home to help with controlling armed traffic to Haiti, for example. And if an intervention in Haiti needs to have a chance to bring about peace, then Haiti needs to be equipped with the tools, with the institutions to maintain peace in the medium and long term. And there need to be mechanism for accountability. We've had intervention in the past where there were violations against human rights, violation against women, and there need to be transparency, and mechanism for accountability need to be inclusive as well. There need to be provision to prosecute foreign military staff who commit crime or violate human rights while on intervention in Haiti. We need to anticipate those, and everyone need to be aware of their resources, what they can do if they are a victim. It needs to be clear. And last but not the least, we need to protect the innocent people. There is an assumption that if a military force comes, the gangs will hide, they will disappear. Could be the case, but we are also witnessing some really powerful gangs members. We have no idea how they will react, and it will be really important to ensure that no innocent people, that the innocent people living in those communities who have no other place to go, we need to ensure that they are safe and we protect the people, the innocent people, as much as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Emmanuela. You highlighted the interconnection of the challenges that Haiti is facing now and the need for an integrated, coordinated response, which reminds me of the Global Fragility Act, Red Alliance for Peace Building. So we're going to talk about the GFA. Jeffsky, as you know, the Global Fragility Act is an attempt at doing such a coordinated response against at least USG agencies, or among USG agencies. Question for you is about the controversy around the choice of Haiti as a GFA country, and just, generally, what is your take on that?
Well, I don't think that I know the criteria as the criteria to determine whether to include a country as part of the GFA or not. But if the idea is to do things differently, and I think Haiti is one of the best candidates, and the reason for that is Haiti is a compelling example of the failure of the U.S. assistance strategy, and all of the mistakes that the U.S. policymakers does not want to repeat, following the GFA framework. They all have been made in Haiti, and I'm talking about military intervention. We're talking about the exclusion of local actors. bypassing the government, for example, in allocating aid, lack of harmonization, between the actors and between like the priorities of the state. So those are all the mistakes that we observe as part of U.S. assistance strategy in Haiti, and those are like the mistakes that we don't want to repeat. So I sincerely believe that Haiti can just be a case study in this sense, and not wanting to include Haiti in any initiative to do things differently, in my opinion, doesn't seem too logical. So and also I don't know all the reason why policymakers wanted to exclude Haiti, but I believe one of them would be that Haiti is too unstable to implement such an initiative, as we were looking forward to a return on investment. On some level, I agree that there needs to be some like a just enough governance for any type of development initiative to be effective. But at the same time, I think instability and weak governance is a characteristic of fragility in general. So to exclude Haiti on this basis would simply mean that a fragility framework that is being developed cannot be tested in a fragile context. So again, and stability in terms of governance is a characteristic in a fragile country. So for me, that's my take on that, and I'm glad that Haiti is part of the GFA, even though we yet to see what the implementation will bring, and how there's gonna be like a sustainable change, or like a radical change in the way that we approach things in Haiti. And I say that because we've seen initiatives like that before. We've seen the Paris Declaration in 2005, that promoted those principles, such as having ownership of the development, harmonization, and all that. There was the Accra agreement in 2008 as well. So I truly hope that there will be like a real change, implementing the Global Fragility Act, and not to repeat the same mistake that we've done in the past, addressing the Haitian situation.
Thank you, Jeffsky. I can see a lot of activity in the chat popping up on the screen, which is great. I do want to take some questions from folks on the line. So I don't have a laptop. Megan, do you mind helping out?
Yeah, there's been a lot of great questions and comments in the chat as well, and we'll save this and share with folks as well. Let me scroll up a little bit so I don't miss too many, but Kira, who works with Jeffsky, had a really good question about among the various marginalized populations across Haiti, did you all find that one or several of them seem to be particularly vulnerable, or were others that were better placed to maximize leveraging of funding or other resources?
Yeah, people are going to say that. People are going to say that I always have the same answer: women, women, women. And on both sides of the questions, yes, they are the most victim. Political violence in Haiti has a history of targeting women and using rape as a weapon, a political weapon. This has been true for at least the last 6 decades. And women organizations are, and I think by far, the sector of civil society that is the most credible today in Haiti. I think if we have a chance of really having a legitimate process or a legitimate political transition, it will have to be at least partly led by feminist and women's organizations that will instill that bit of credibility that people are so that they really want to see. There's an expression in Creole that says "quatre pelouse." It means prime seat at a game. And I feel like the vast majority of the population is looking at the political process like it was a game, with a lot of distance. They are looking at coalitions of civil society organizations, releasing statement after statement. They're looking at the private sector, releasing statement after statement, not even talking about the government, but they do not feel that this concerns them. And I think the only sector, the only organized sector in the national life today that can reach out to them and let them understand that this is something that concerns them and that they should be part of are women organizations.
Yeah.
Some other questions specifically related to the GFA. What will we do to enable a more collective impact approach to improve impact? How can more GFA-focused conversations take place inside of Haiti so that peace builders on the front lines can be engaged in ongoing fashion to strengthen efforts and to be strengthened by them? That's a really good question. And how can local actors be positioned to influence what is coming?
I think when it comes to conversations about the GFA, the interagency folks that have been working on it have done a good job at consulting people. Of course, the situation does not help. The fact that you cannot get out of Port-au-Prince in most cases, except by plane, and that a lot of organizations do not have access to internet or good communications does not help as well. I think at this point, a lot of inputs have been collected. And if we really want to localize the GFA implementation, it starts by empowering local organizations. At this point, I think a lot have been said. Now it's what we're doing and who are we doing it with? And do the people that we need to do it with have what it takes to be able to help us? And it's about empowering, it's about capacity building, it's about making sure that all organizations in all sectors, well, not all, that most organizations in most sectors and in most regions are targeted, are being consulted, and are being helped to be able to provide the feedback that the GFA team needs for implementation. Because the GFA is very, I would say it's intangible for people. What they want to know is how they can get their country better, and each in their sector. And it's about finding out what are the tools for the USG to give them so they can do the work.
In your conversations, and this can go to the panelists as well, and in your conversations with folks both in the country and the diaspora, I'm curious as to whether the US government has effectively communicated what the GFA is. It's supposed to be a long-term 10-year investment, iterative, changing, adapting to the circumstances on the ground, but are they communicating effectively so folks understand that this is long-term? It's not just a one-time infusion of, for instance, humanitarian aid, which, given historically, it's different, right? It's doing business different. And to the extent they understand it, is there buy-in?
I'll take a first stab at it and then would love to hear Jeffsky's and Emmanuela's point of view on that. I think we have to recognize that the USG and Haiti, and this goes a little bit with the question that Christy asked Jeffsky about the choice of Haiti. I think the USG is in a difficult situation, whereas one of the criteria at least in theory, for the elaboration of a GFA strategy is also a credible interlocutor. And because there is no credible state interlocutor, and because there is not one right now, I think it was perhaps difficult to communicate broadly about a GFA. And I mean, I know of consultations with civil society. I don't know how it was done with the government, but I certainly think that it must not have been easy. So this, I think, might have maybe impeded a broader communication, and remains an issue. I think in terms of the GFA implementation in Haiti in the current context, we should not say, well, Haiti does not tick the box of a credible government or a legitimate government and move on to another country, but we have to be imaginative and see what we can do with civil society to foster the demand for a legitimate government. Because at the end of the day, we spoke about institutions, we spoke about anti-corruption institution, we spoke about the HNP, but I think one thing that the international community should stop doing is to try to find one champion within the state and say, this institution is who I'm going to work with, who I'm going to give technical assistance to, and I'm going to embed three super consultants in it and make it work. It's not working. It has been tried with OMRH, which is the human resources arm of the Haitian government. It has been done several times in all the temporary CEP that we've had. It has been done with the HNP for decades. It's not looking at the old social contract, not looking at the relationship between the state and the citizens, and just trying to have one institution that was working, is putting your resources into something that the rest of the state is going to combat. And this is going to be repeating itself over and over again.
Jeffsky or Emmanuela, do you have anything to add?
No, that was good.
Thanks, Emma.
Maybe one more, Megan?
What about a social contract? Okay, while I look. Is the tool or your assessment going to be made public? Folks are interested in wondering if they'll be able to use it, perhaps in public reports. And also, can we share the deck afterwards?
The deck can definitely be shared. I have to say, at MSI, we really have a big commitment to keeping the conversation about Haiti alive. And Haiti is in a political turmoil right now where things need to be said. So we kind of went fast and captured the most, I would say, striking elements of the assessment to fuel the conversation. We still have some, I would say, reviews to be made to be sure that the tool is, I would say, ready for the use in other countries. One thing that we certainly learned is that it can be used in very diverse contexts. We were a team of 3 with interlocutors with no gas, no electricity, no internet, and we made it in a month. So I think it's going to be very useful in other diverse contexts, but we still need some more fine tuning before we can, I would say, provide a standard version to the public.
And I think you mentioned this early in the beginning, but for folks that came on late, how many folks did you interview and participate in the assessment?
We interviewed, Emma, I would like you to, I mean, this is an opportunity for you to talk a little bit about the process, talk about the interviewers. I would leave you that question.
And how were they selected as well?
Yes, we interviewed around 15 people. They were from different sectors, different background, and as much as possible, people who are not publicly associated with any political group, so that to avoid any bias. And I need to also say that the results are not solely from the interviews. Before the interviews, we had a background research stage. In that stage, we conducted literature review for all the characteristics. We answered all the questions using data from international organizations, local statistic institutions, and then the second stage, the second method we used to collect information were the interviewed. We had women, we had head of organization, we had people living in rural area, people from the private sector, we had expert, and we also collected data from expert publication that people were not interviewed but gave interview where information were collected as well, and we combine all of them to have the score.
I want to add that the ideal number of interviewees in general for Solstice was around 20. One thing that we were not able to do in this context were focus groups. But like Emma said, I think that given the context, doing the interviews were really difficult. I would say the 5 or 6 interviews that we didn't get in person, we got from secondary interviews of people talking about a specific subject that was an additional input. But the rural world was covered, urban, difficult neighborhoods, farmers, women, youth, elderly. I mean, I think it gives you a large spectrum of the Haitian society.
And I want to add that we had a representative from 2 of the most affected communities in Haiti. We had someone from Cité Soleil. We had someone from Croix des Bouquets as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that question came up a couple of times, so thanks for that. And then just, maybe one last question, really easy one. For our donor friends that are on the line or that we're in contact with, what are the key, and I'm touching this in your presentation, but what are the key programming programs that they should be funding right now to help stabilize the situation?
I think the first thing is to persevere and continue in reinforcing local organizations and giving opportunities for dialogue. I will talk about something a little bit more political. We all know about the Montana Group. The Montana Group is composed of more than 100 organizations. Most of the times we don't hear from them. They have signed the initial agreement, but there are women organizations in Inch that have signed the Montana Group, and they signed it 18 months ago. And I don't know what they think today, because they do not have the means to be present at the table. And I think if we are really being serious, and the sanctions lean into that direction, if we're really being serious about that whole process, then it has to be done, like Emmanuela said, in a context of credible transition with the buy-in of the most sectors as possible. And the only way to do that is to give the opportunities to the local organizations to reach out to their constituents, to tell them, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? What should I say for you? But if they don't have access to internet, they don't have solar panels to even write a report of what was said in Port-au-Prince to say to their communities, how are they supposed to do that? So I think this is one thing, and I keep repeating it, and it specifically applies to women's group, because a lot of other sectors, whether they're unions or chambers of commerces, et cetera, have been, I would say, tainted over the years. Women's organizations still have their credibility intact for most cases. Give them the means to go and talk to their people so they can bring back and give these people a seat at the table. That's one thing. And then I've touched on before all the needs for people who have been displaced, people who are living in the difficult neighborhoods. There is also the humanitarian crisis that is caused by the fact that the entrances of Port-au-Prince, et cetera, are closed. See what we can do for these farmers, because the USG, for instance, has invested years and years of technical assistance and money into increasing the production of different crops in the north or in the south. And today, the farmers have put everything that they have into this, and they cannot have access to market. So this is another thing to work on.
Okay, well, Emma, Jeffsky, Kalinda, thank you so much for your work on the pilot, your work generally on Haiti, and certainly for the panel discussion today. Megan, thanks again to AFP for hosting, and thanks to everybody on the line who joined in and those who contributed in the chat.
Thank you so much.